Story 1. In my experience, being a lawyer is very different from how it appears on television. People enter the profession thinking it will be like the TV show Suits, but they end up spending long days, often 16 hours, reading documents and getting yelled at by their boss. Many of my friends have quit law firms. Story 2. Almost nothing in the video game industry is easy unless you pull off an indie hit. Development is a grueling slog of crunch. Testing is playing the same level of Barbie horse adventures for a week while trying to reproduce a bug. Story 3. Being a flight attendant. Everyone thinks it is glamorous. Travel and layovers in Paris, but it is mostly long hours, rude passengers, jet lag, and being on your feet constantly. Story 4. Owning and running a restaurant or bar and making it past 1 year is a huge accomplishment. Overhead and the state and federal standards that must be met and maintained just to legally serve patrons will keep you up at night. People would be shocked to learn how much a liquor license costs, especially in some states. Trying to compete with all the established restaurant chains is nearly impossible. Yelp has been one of the worst things to happen to a small, independent business owner. Story 5. Archaeology is often boring and the pay is poor. Story 6. Anything involving extensive travel. You visit many places, but you only see hotels and the occasional restaurant. Story 7. This applies to the veterinary industry. I know colleagues who have struggled to find a therapist who can handle the trauma we have seen. There is trauma, low pay, and clients who accuse us of being in it only for the money, as if any of us receive that money instead of the corporation. Many of us struggle to pay veterinary bills for our own pets even with the often inadequate discount we are given. It is not uncommon to vomit from anxiety before every shift. I would not recommend this to anyone. I know almost no technician who can afford to live alone. It also destroys your body quickly. Story 8. A librarian's job is not quiet or peaceful. You do not get paid to read. Story 9. Farming. When you visit your farmer cousin for the weekend, it is easy to think that farming is all about all-terrain vehicle rides, feeding calves, quick, clean milkings, and fishing in the evening. But that is only because of the backbreaking work he put in during the weeks and months prior, fixing tractors in cold, snowy conditions, dealing with the relentless mud, worrying about bills, and trying to keep cows from dying in the August humidity. Story 10. Entrepreneurship involves long hours, high risk, and mental strain. You may earn little or no pay in the first few years and face lawsuits, but if it all works out, you can end up living a better life. Story 11. I have not pursued a career. I have been receiving a pension since a very early age because of medical issues. Having virtually unlimited free time might sound like a dream, but after a while I realized my life lacked purpose and, in the long run, there was little to fill that time. Story 12. Pilot. Away from home. I hope you do not fly with someone who is on a power trip. You will have a lot of time alone and odd sleep schedules because of time zones. Story 13. Teaching is often imagined as inspiring young minds every day, but in reality it involves long hours, administrative work, low pay, and constant stress outside the classroom. Story 14. Damn. As an accountant reading through these comments, I'm feeling a lot better about my career choice. At least there was no pretense of it ever being anything more than a mind-numbing slog. Story 15. Working at an animal shelter and with animals in general can cause compassion fatigue. Seeing the worst side of people and how they treat animals is distressing. Story 16. I am an architect. People think I am making bank and designing all day. I am rereading the confusing municipal zoning code, a bad scan of type sheets and outdated rules from the 1980s in some jurisdictions. Thankfully, most have caught up in the last decade. The rest of the job is trying to make everyone else happy and earn a lot of money. You might work late hours obsessing over the code book to make some wildly impractical client requirement work. Then the project stalls and dies because the client's financing fell through, and now you are out of work. I feel like the highs and lows of this job are too extreme. Story 17. Artist. Unless you have rich parents, you will spend the first 20 years working retail while people try to get you to do free work for exposure. Story 18. A professional speaker and well-known author is often imagined as living a glamorous, globe-trotting lifestyle with adoring audiences. The reality is long periods of solitude, many nights spent alone while traveling, and difficulty maintaining relationships. Story 19. Television is not glamorous. People are egocentric. They pick favorites and sometimes try to ruin your reputation to make themselves look good. The talent can be unpleasant as well. Story 20. All of them. Very few people are fortunate enough to have a genuine dream job. Story 21. Graphic design is dead due to artificial intelligence. Two-dimensional and three-dimensional animation seems appealing to students entering college, but once you get to physics and animation, it is no longer just drawing. There is a lot of calculation and less traditional art. Art can become pasting a bitmap over the object's wireframe, UVW mapping, and other technical processes. Digital sculpting exists, but that is another type of work. Once you start doing this kind of work, you begin to deconstruct the process, which for many people who love the idea of the job can destroy the magic and potentially spoil the hobby they once enjoyed. Most digital artists are underappreciated and undervalued because artificial intelligence can create work and undercut their commissions. Story 22. Nurse. You think it will be all about being warm, kind, gentle, and lovingly ministering to sick people who are grateful for your care. Instead, it is a high-stress, high-liability job in which any decision you make could result in patient harm, job loss, or loss of your license. You are always on edge and never relax. You perform complex tasks under significant time pressure, you are constantly interrupted, and you often have more tasks than you have time to complete. You are routinely abused by patients, patients' families, and doctors. The general public has very little understanding of how badly the healthcare system is unraveling. The system is held together by bubble gum and duct tape and by the blood, sweat, and tears of nurses who are so overwhelmed that many literally vomit from anxiety before their shifts start. 50% of new nurses quit the profession within 2 years. They cannot handle the stress, the toxic work environments, the unreasonable expectations and demands, the time pressure, and the abuse. Story 23. Work in the industry. Modeling isn't high-paying or about first-class flights to Paris. It's a lot of low-paid and unpaid work, but demands a very flexible schedule from your other job. Story 24. Working as a writer or editor in media. The pay is low, and return-to-office mandates are the norm again, so you are expected to live in a high-cost-of-living area. Management is often completely out of touch with day-to-day expectations and expects you to give your soul to the company. Most journalists I know work much more than 40 hours per week, and because they are salaried, they do not receive overtime or extra pay. Some publications have unions and thus union protections, which helps, but union strength varies. Layoffs have hit every major publication, and the leftover workloads are piled on those who remain. Expect distrust and hostility from the general public. Apart from incidents in which journalists have been targeted, journalist stories are often accused of churning out artificial intelligence slop, which is damaging at best and fatal at worst for many reasons. It is a thankless job with long hours and usually very low pay. Story 25. Doctor of philosophy and academia are often romanticized, but the reality is not that sweet. Story 26. Professional sports involve endless pressure to perform and the constant risk that one injury could end your career. Athletes are often targets of social media trolls. Story 27. The cannabis industry faces the same problems as other comparable industries such as farming, warehousing, production, retail, logistics, and so on. However, the cannabis industry has many more rules and laws. You could go to jail for an innocent mistake, or even someone else's mistake. You could face thousands of dollars in fines, possible jail time, and be blackballed. The novelty of it gets old quickly. Story 28. I am seeing a common thread. Extremely low pay and excessive required overtime with only a few exceptions. If you had a union, this would not be nearly as bad. Story 29. Being a chef is demanding. Many people think, why didn't I become a chef? They fail to realize the endless hours of physical work required to produce good food. It's not just creative cooking. It's really hard work. Story 30. Software developer. I kept seeing TikToks titled "A Day in the Life of a Software Developer," and they had nothing to do with actual software development. Maybe I am just unlucky, but my job has always been extremely stressful. A heavy workload and frequent arguments with people who do not understand that no, you cannot just add Azure to a massive, ancient on-premises database in 30 minutes. Story 31. Teaching. Kids these days are monsters. Some parents think it is the teacher's responsibility to raise their children too. The daily disrespect was constant. Hence, I quit a couple of years ago. Story 32. Professor in academia. After spending years earning a Doctor of Philosophy degree, you will likely receive low pay and have no job security. In many fields, there are so few positions that you will almost certainly need to move across the country each time you change jobs, if you can find one at all. Student evaluations carry significant weight at many schools, so you are often performing customer service. Your supervisor, the principal investigator who has tenure, can make or break your entire career. Story 33. Software engineering. No one is saying an office job that offers the potential to earn more than most households in the United States will ever see is not attractive. But if you are not strong in algorithms, mathematics, and programming, you are unlikely to work at the large technology companies or banks that pay the highest salaries. You will likely work at a mid-tier, no-name firm or a startup that is not yet profitable. At those firms, raises and promotions will be rare or non-existent because the company is burning through cash without customers and with only a weak plan to acquire them. Salaries at these mid-tier firms and failing startups may not be higher than what tradespeople can earn. Benefits may be limited because technology workers do not unionize. Job security is also limited. Roles can be replaced by contractors, offshore labor, new graduates willing to accept low pay, or by a senior engineer using an artificial intelligence tool. You can end up working long hours and weekends around release dates to fix problems caused by poor planning and other inexperienced engineers, and all that time in front of a computer can harm your health. Software engineering is not a guaranteed ticket to a good life. As with any profession, you need to enjoy the work and be skilled to advance in your career or earn a high salary. Story 34. Anything creative. Generally envied by my friends who have 9:30 to 4:30, six-figure remote corporate jobs and are bored. Story 35. Writer, especially when you are writing clickbait for a buzz-adjacent site. Story 36. There are so many things listed here and quite a variety. It seems to me that work just sucks. Anything fun or creative is great until your rent or meals depend on it. Story 37. Adventure guide. Many wealthy tourists want a polished experience. It's a thankless job, but 20% of the guests are genuinely appreciative. Story 38. Working with people with learning disabilities. I know it is not something many people want or dream of doing, but it is often romanticized in media. It is almost always a kind person with Down syndrome who just needs support with independence. Someone makes fun of them so a hero can swoop in, and it is pointed out how rewarding it is. In reality, there is often physical aggression such as hitting, biting, or slapping. There is a lot of cleaning up bodily fluids. There is frequent interpretation of sounds because some people are nonverbal. It requires multiple contingency plans. There are often refusals of medication for life-threatening conditions. Of course, it can be rewarding. I love what I do and all the children I meet. But I learned within days that they can be just as much of a handful as any other child. Story 39. Being a student, whether at the pre-kindergarten level, the doctoral level, or anywhere in between, is often romanticized later in life because people either forget what it is actually like or did not have the negative experiences many students face. Story 40. Any profession you have not done can be romanticized. Story 41. Social media manager. Everyone thinks it is just posting cute pictures all day. In reality, it is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week job where you are constantly fighting with algorithms, dealing with many weird direct messages, and analyzing data until your eyes go blurry. Story 42. Being president looks cool until you realize half the country instantly hates you. Story 43. Investment banking and finance can be very lucrative. However, long hours, constant pressure to deliver positive returns, and pressure to keep up with the Joneses regarding clothes, trips, and investment performance make the field less desirable. These factors cause significant burnout and, in some cases, lead to unscrupulous business decisions. Story 44. Computer science. The pay is good, but the job market and job stability are poor. Unless you work remotely, the working conditions can be difficult. You are often sitting at a desk from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Story 45. Being a chef is really awful. The people you work alongside in that industry are often a mess, either using hard drugs or alcohol. If you do neither, you are seen as weird. The number of hours you have to work is insane for terrible pay. Story 46. Product management. Many people in the technology industry wanted that role, but I do not know many who were happy doing it. It involves a massive amount of responsibility with little autonomy. You are told you are in charge of a product, but you are mostly subject to the will of executives. It is full of politics, pressure, and nonsense, at least in the large technology companies where I worked. Story 47. Being a doctor is not just about the long schooling. It is the worsening of your mental health, the gradual loss of your sense of self, weekly exams, constant relocations, and low pay during residency even when you are doing the work of a doctor. You are told to work more than 60 hours a week for $18 an hour. At the end of it all, just as you see the light, you are hit with $500,000 of debt. Story 48. Archaeologists, thanks to Indiana Jones, often face hard labor, long, hot days, and little pay. Story 49. Being an author is difficult. Large advances are rare, and most of the time they are paid in 4 to 5 installments over 18 months to 2 years. So even a $100,000 advance can amount to about $50,000 a year, minus taxes and your agent's commission. Most authors have other day jobs because earning enough to write full-time is hard, and getting one book contract does not mean you are set or will easily get another. With publishers pulling back on marketing plans and relying heavily on hoping a book goes viral on BookTok rather than doing active promotion, many authors are left to market their books themselves or to hire private public relations firms. There is also no guarantee bookstores will stock your book in store, so discoverability by browsing in a bookstore is reduced. It is an extremely fickle industry. Writing is a passion, but publishing is a business. Anyone working in publishing should not assume it is glamorous. Editors are not sitting around reading books all day. They do much less actual editing than they used to because they are taking on additional roles. They are overworked and underpaid, especially considering that many live in New York City and have a starting wage of around $45,000 per year. Story 50. I worked as an emergency medical technician at a rural fire department. I responded to medical emergencies, fires, and other incidents. It was less about heroically grabbing babies from burning buildings and more about slowly watching my waistline expand as I sat around and ate junk food. Story 51. Cybersecurity. Most people think it is just nation-state red teaming and nothing else. The technical side is traumatically complex and feels like an arms race. The governance and managerial side is drier than Death Valley in a heat wave. Some people are just awful, too. Every organization has something like a chief technical principal, design lead, security architect, manager, or other variation. They are usually a neckbeard. They are not the chief information security officer, but their word is law, and they obstinately insert themselves into every project. The management side is just people in suits making grand gestures, getting paid huge bonuses for telling you to use multi-factor authentication. Most of the time you wonder why you even bother. A system undergoes an annual penetration test and the same issues recur because they do not read the report or take action. The technical staff responsible for the platform do not want you there and make your life as hard as possible. Why do I also have to endure 17-factor authentication just to read the office newsletter about a raffle next week? While some teenager in another country can call our help desk and social engineer a password reset to deploy ransomware and cost the company billions. Story 52. My personal experience is in nursing. My friend's experience is that there are many depressed engineers. Story 53. Engineering. Most people do not work on Lamborghinis or rockets. Story 54. Sailing. I served in the Navy, and a friend of mine is a merchant marine. You work 7 days a week at a minimum of 12 hours a day, often for months on end. Internet access is spotty. If the cooks are bad, you are in serious trouble, and if your crew is poor, your life will be a living nightmare because you also live with them. Watches are terrible. If you are injured on a merchant ship, you are vulnerable. Only first aid can usually be provided. Crews are small on merchant ships. By contrast, Navy vessels have hundreds of sailors to interact with. Regarding the Navy, merchant mariners get literal months off to do whatever they want. In the Navy, once you are on shore, your workday becomes more normal, but outside of leave time, you will still work. Merchant mariners also earn significantly more. A newly hired merchant mariner with no high school education will often make the same as an O1. Story 55. I offer my 2 cents. Surgery can seem glamorous and exciting when responding to a major emergency or removing a tumor, until you consider doing many such cases per day plus add-ons. It can be a pressure cooker environment with a range of personalities, which makes for entertaining television but makes day-to-day life stressful. Story 56. I was a park ranger for 7 years. The pay was low, housing was provided, but your family was confined to that house. You worked nights, weekends, and holidays, so there was no social life. In my experience, there was a steady stream of late-night calls and rescues, from breaking up parties to snaking drain lines. Opportunities for advancement depended on your family's willingness to relocate and then find a new employer. I was a state employee, so whatever the governor or the legislature wanted had to be carried out. Story 57. Being a nurse seems like an amazing job, caring for people and sometimes cleaning up their bodily waste. Story 58. As a pastor, everyone thinks it is lavish, requires very little work or time, has no stress, and offers great money. Nothing could be further from the truth outside of the top 1%. It is constant and always under scrutiny. The pay is poor, taxes are very high, and the demands on you and your family are intense. Those were the worst 12 years of my life. Story 59. Being a doctor nowadays involves a lot of paperwork and meetings to contest insurance companies that try to dictate how to treat patients and how to do your job. I have seen many patients suffer as a result. Story 60. I was a test driver for a large automobile manufacturer. It was very enjoyable for about the first 2 months. Then everything started hurting. Story 61. Horticulture. People think working with plants is almost therapeutic, but the jobs are unstable, underpaid, not very well respected, physically taxing, and can even be dangerous. Story 62. Being an actor is tough. Most actors earn the bare minimum to survive. You often have to take work that is beneath you and hold multiple jobs unrelated to your chosen profession, even after earning a graduate degree. You have little control over the finished product. Story 63. People recognize that commercial fishing or any rustic lifestyle is hard and unpleasant, but they idealize the best parts. They never consider that the hard parts actually exist day after day, and it is a slap in the face when you try it unexpectedly. There is a reason people complain and are in a bad mood all the time. It is stressful, not some Jeremiah Johnson type thing. Story 64. A lifeguard is not nearly as glamorous as you would think. It is basically being a janitor and a parent. Story 65. It is not so much a job as a position. People always dream of being their own boss, but it is hard. You must make sure the bills are paid, clients are satisfied, and employees are paid, while wondering whether you are making enough to pay yourself that week. It is probably the most stressful thing you can do, especially when first starting up or when a downturn hits. Story 66. Both relate to teaching. First is the bubbly, enthusiastic, empathetic teacher's pet type who thinks teaching will be fun and that they will have a positive influence on young lives. Second is the male stereotype who ruled the school in high school and now wants to teach health and coach football. In reality, teaching today is hard, stressful, and not very rewarding. Story 67. Founding a startup is nonstop stress and long hours, with a high likelihood that you will lose the money you invested. Running a venture fund is an absolute grind of meetings, networking, and travel, requiring you to remain friendly and engaging while you must politely say no 99 times for every yes. Story 68. Anything art-related. Most people do art as a hobby, so they assume artists have fun all day. But it is a job like any other. It requires specialized skills, time, and energy, and you must keep practicing or your skills will atrophy. If you do not keep up with technology, you will fall behind. You may work on a cool project now and then, but much of your career will involve drudgery, and many in society treat your work as easy and unimportant. Story 69. People think being a medic or firefighter is going to be non-stop action, saving lives in vehicle wrecks and extinguishing huge fires. In reality, both jobs often involve helping elderly people who are stuck between the toilet and the bathtub. Story 70. Entrepreneurship sounds cool. Having your own business can be rewarding. Story 71. Game developer. High risk, not usually very high reward. Crunch time is brutal. Market demands can be fickle. It is not like sitting around playing video games all day. You are often at odds with concerned parents and families and with poor industry decisions. You are targeting gamers. Story 72. Game development is more like software development than a playful job. There are moments of fun, but many people think developers have a lot of free time to sit around, talk, and think about games and explore topics in depth. The reality is constant deadlines. Story 73. Motion pictures are good if you are part of a union or guild. Otherwise, they are pretty exploitative. Story 74. It seems there are no jobs I romanticize or would even consider. Although I can understand why someone would dream of being, say, a teacher, reality is always so much worse than expected. I'm working on getting an education, but I have no illusions of the job being anything other than a chore. I just have to hang on until it's done. Also, artificial intelligence is going to take everything away from us anyway. Story 75. Urban planning. Unless you are well into your career and working in the private sector, you are going to be doing residential permitting. Story 76. On the bartending subreddit, there are constantly people asking about how to get into bartending, including some who already have established careers and want to switch. It is not like being Tom Cruise or like bartending in television and movies. It is not just making cocktails and entertaining guests. You are probably not going to make a lot of money when you first enter the industry. The good jobs and shifts require connections and experience, which are gained through many long nights, stressful work, physical labor, cleaning, and dealing with difficult people. Earnings vary. Sometimes the money is great, sometimes it is low. Most gigs offer no benefits. I love it, but there are many downsides that are not immediately apparent from the other side of the bar. Story 77. I once asked a doctor what the worst part of his job was. He said it was customer service. I replied that he was a doctor and not in customer service. He said he was, and it gets worse every day. That really hit home. Story 78. Bartender. It can be fun and easy until it drastically changes and you are juggling 10 things going wrong at once because someone is upset they cannot cash out. The other week, a man was having a seizure when someone walked in, stepped around him, and asked if we were open. Yes, I am open, but did you not notice this medical situation that you stepped around? Story 79. Many of the jobs Mike Rowe tries to romanticize on his Dirty Jobs show are physically demanding. Macho conservative men often go on and on about how blue-collar jobs that require a lot of labor are real manly jobs, but they do not realize how physically taxing those jobs can be in the long term and that they are not necessarily worth the pay. For example, my father was an electrician and he has had about 5 hernia surgeries because of the work. Story 80. Being a chef is hard. Everything hurts, including your wallet. The end. Story 81. I was a model for a while, doing bridal couture and alternative modeling. I was a United Kingdom size 8 and was asked to lose weight to get more work. I told them to F right off. Story 82. As a fry cook, you are the center of the food production line and an integral part of a fast-paced team. But the reality is there is a lot of emptying grease traps and taking out the garbage. It is not all glamour, folks. Story 83. Writer. I've experienced too much emotional damage from writing and forming emotional connections with my characters. Story 84. Modeling. The pay is terrible and the boss can fire you for gaining or losing weight. Agencies discriminate over every little thing. Hair, height, skin color, waist size, breast size, nose shape. Every body part is criticized. You work long hours, and the company can discard your pictures if someone else looks better. Runway jobs are not easy to book either. Story 85. Teaching often evokes memories of what people experienced in school. There is a great deal of paperwork and stress behind the scenes. Student behavior and abilities have become more challenging, in part because of smart devices and reduced parental involvement. Story 86. Fashion. The people are more horrible than you might think. They have no self-awareness. Story 87. Horse trainer. It is grueling, the hours are long, the sport is dangerous, the pay is atrocious. But goddamn, it is better than a desk job. Story 88. Being a park ranger or working in similar interpretive and recreation-centered jobs means you get to be in beautiful places. But pay is low and maintaining public facilities is very thankless. Oh great, the person who defecates outside the vault toilet every weekend visited again. Story 89. I am a musician. I played in bands on and off for about 15 years. It is nowhere near as glamorous as some people think. Story 90. Animation seems glamorous. People like the idea of working on films and series and seeing their work on the big screen. I love drawing and enjoy my work, but once you are in your 30s, the financial uncertainty is rough when you are trying to settle down. You do not know if you will find projects after your current one ends. If you have a terrible employer or client, you can be severely harmed. It is awful to be effectively job hunting every 6 months. Studios have no loyalty. Most artists, even on the biggest productions, are freelancers and do not belong anywhere. It is very thankless work with little recognition. Story 91. Astrophysics, although its challenges are quite similar to those of other research careers. Most people think it involves sitting at a telescope all night, discovering a new galaxy or asteroid, and becoming the next Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson. While the science is genuinely exciting, most of the time is spent writing grant proposals, trying to publish papers that will be noticed by the community, securing funding for one's position, managing a teaching load in academic roles, navigating internal and external politics, and coping with compensation that is well below standard in many countries. Story 92. After reading all these comments, is there really any good job or career to pursue? Story 93. Conservation biologist. You think you will be outside collecting data and publishing research, but instead you are staffing a table at an Earth Day event downtown, handing out flyers to people who want free giveaways. Or you are pretending to be a bird for a group of snotty kids. Or you are mowing lawns constantly. Story 94. As many have said, neoliberal jobs include lawyers, Wall Street firms, weapons manufacturers, and tech corporations. I can attest to 2 of those personally. Burnout will catch up to you eventually. It always does. My heart goes out to software developers. Your work is never done. Every time you implement something, management changes course or scraps the project, your work goes unrecognized or is deemed insufficient, and you can be laid off without notice. That uncertainty pushes you to work harder every day. Yet you serve under a hierarchical system whose leaders often make decisions without regard for you. Story 95. For me, it is being a farmer. I have been farming for 15 seasons now, and the number of people who tell me I have their dream job or say how lucky I am is countless. I really love my vocation, but most of those people would not last a couple of years in it. Story 96. All jobs and every second of your life. Be responsible for your own happiness. Story 97. From what I'm gathering, every job sucks. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.